Welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you're a marketing executive, you already know that data is the absolute lifeblood of your campaigns, right? But there's actually a silent crisis happening right inside your marketing stack. You're spending thousands, maybe even millions on ads, but a pretty huge chunk of your perfectly legal user-consented data is just vanishing, completely gone. And this lost data is literally starving your automated bidding algorithms. It makes them way less efficient and drives your customer acquisition costs right through the roof. So, today, we're going to fix that. Imagine this for a second. Your customers are literally handing you their information. They're saying, yep, absolutely, you can track my purchase. But somehow, that message never actually reaches your analytics dashboard. It's kind of like sending perfectly legitimate letters through the post office, but the mail carrier just decides to throw them away. No way, right? But this isn't some weird glitch, and it's definitely not illegal. It's just the reality of how modern web browsers work. So today, we're going to uncover exactly why this permitted marketing data is just vanishing into thin air before it ever reaches Google, and most importantly, how we can get it back. So, here's our roadmap for demystifying all of this. First, we'll look at the illusion of the pop-up. Then, translating consent for Google. Third, why marketing data actually gets lost. After that, we'll get into the server-side tracking solution, understand the technology ecosystem behind it, and finally, the most important part, the bottom line ROI.
All right, Section 1, the illusion of the pop-up. Let's dive right in.
We really need to shatter a super common misconception right out of the gate. A lot of people think that just slapping a cookie pop-up on their website means tracking and compliance are fully sorted out. But think of your website like opening a brand new physical shop. When a customer walks through the door, you naturally gather valuable intel, right? You see what they look at, maybe what ad brought them in, and whether they actually bought something at the register. But in the digital world, new privacy rules have totally changed the game. Now, before you can collect any of that info, you have to ask a simple question first. Are you okay with us collecting this? And honestly, that is all a cookie pop-up does. It's literally just a yes or no question. The pop-up itself doesn't store information, it doesn't analyze anything, and it for sure doesn't send anything to Google. It's just asking for permission.
Which brings us to Section 2, translating consent for Google. So if the pop-up is only asking the question, what actually handles the answer? Enter consent mode. This is a completely distinct, separate system from your pop-up. See, if a user clicks I accept on your site, someone or something needs to tap Google Analytics on the shoulder and say, hey, this visitor gave the green light, you can start measuring. Or, whoops, they declined cookies, hold off. That's exactly what consent mode does. It's that crucial middle step in your data pipeline that communicates the visitor's choice directly to Google.
I love this metaphor from the source material because the interaction here is just fascinating. Think of your cookie pop-up as a receptionist. The receptionist politely asks, may I take your details? But they don't actually process that data. Consent mode is the translator, standing right behind them. The receptionist gets the answer, and then the translator turns around and tells Google exactly what it is and isn't allowed to do based on that answer. They work together for sure, but they have entirely different jobs.
Okay, moving on to Section 3, why marketing data actually gets lost.
Now we hit the core problem. What happens when the user clicks I accept, the translator gives Google the go-ahead, Google Analytics starts measuring, but your data still doesn't show up in your reports? Well, this brings us right back to our lost in the mail problem. Today's browsers are aggressively privacy-focused. I mean, Safari blocks things, Firefox blocks things, you've got ad blockers, third-party extensions, corporate firewalls, and increasingly even Chrome is putting up massive roadblocks. So even though your user gave you full 100% legal permission to track their purchase, their browser essentially intercepts the mail carrier and shreds the letter before it ever reaches Google Analytics. Nothing broke on your website, nothing illegal happened, the tracking data just didn't arrive because the browser blocked it.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, the server-side tracking solution.
This massive loss of perfectly good, consented data is exactly why we need a bypass. To really get why server-side tracking is such a game-changer, let's look at the standard setup most businesses are running right now. You've got the visitor interacting with your site. Their browser is then tasked with sending that behavioral data directly to Google. Do you see the huge vulnerability here? You are entirely relying on the visitor's browser to deliver your most critical marketing data. If that browser has an ad blocker, or if they're using Safari, boom, that connection is severed and your data is just gone forever.
But with server-side tracking, we fundamentally change how that information travels. Instead of crossing our fingers and relying on the visitor's browser, the data goes from the visitor to your website and then directly to your own private server. And from there, your server sends that permitted information straight to Google. Because the data is being sent server to server, it completely bypasses all those browser blockades. Ad blockers and browser restrictions literally cannot intercept the communication between your private server and Google's server. Your lost mail finally gets delivered every single time.
All right, let's look at Section 5, Understanding the Technology Ecosystem.
Now, a super logical question to ask here is, if this is such a brilliant solution, why doesn't Google just manage the whole shebang out of the box for everyone? Well, actually, Google did build all this core tech. They created server-side Google Tag Manager, the measurement protocols, the server containers, all of it. But they don't host or manage it for individual businesses. Think of it like the car industry. Google is Toyota. They build the car. But third-party tools like Tagris, for example, act as the dealership and the mechanic. They don't replace Google's tech. They just package it up and make it incredibly easy to use. Sure, a massive enterprise with a huge IT team could build and maintain their own server-side infrastructure from scratch. But for most of us, paying for a third-party tool is exactly like buying accounting software instead of coding your own from scratch. It's just a massive, completely necessary shortcut to convenience.
And finally, Section 6, the bottom line, ROI. This is arguably the most important part of this whole explainer for any executive listening. This isn't just some IT compliance project. This is a revenue recovery engine, and it all comes down to one metric, 5 to 10%. When you bypass those browser blockades using your own server, you can recover roughly 5 to 10% of your lost conversion data. Now, if you are spending heavily on advertising, just think about what that actually means. You're feeding 5 to 10% more accurate, verified purchase data directly into Google's automated bidding algorithms. And when those algorithms have better, more complete data, they make vastly smarter bidding decisions. That recovered data directly translates into way better campaign optimization and a highly measurable return on investment.
So let's pull all of this together and summarize how this entire privacy tracking trifecta works in perfect harmony. First, your cookie pop-up simply asks for permission. Next, consent mode acts as the translator, communicating that decision to the back end. Then, Google Analytics stands ready to collect the permitted info. And finally, your server-side setup using a tool like Taggers ensures that the permitted information is actually delivered reliably right past those modern browser blockades. Each tool has a very specific job. None of them replaces the other, but together, they respect visitor privacy while giving you the absolute highest quality marketing data possible.
I do want to leave you with a really balanced view on this, though. As our source material wisely points out, server-side tracking is an optimization, not a strict requirement. If your ad spend is relatively small right now, honestly, setting up standard consent mode perfectly well might be totally enough for you. That should be your absolute first priority. But once that's running smoothly, and if you are spending significant amounts on ads every single month, then server-side tracking becomes an incredibly valuable optimization that you really need to evaluate.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought. You've already done the hard work of getting visitors to your site, right? And you've played by the rules to get their consent. Are you ready to stop letting lost data dictate your automated bidding decisions? It might just be time to ensure that the data you rightfully earned actually makes it to the finish line. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to go take a close look at your own tracking pipeline today.